this episode of Take Up and Read. My name is Joe Chrisman, and I'm your host. As I talk about books with friends, family members, members of my church, or even fellow pastors, I find they all have the same question. How can I read more? Over the years, I've found many different helpful practices and tips for my own desire to read as much as I can. And so today I'd like to consider 10 tips on how to read more. Tip number 1, just get started. This tip may sound silly at first, but we can get so often stuck in our heads about how much we want to read, how great we think it will be to read, our plans to read in the near future, when really what we need to do is just start reading. Perhaps you don't really read at all, but you'd like to start. Maybe you are a reader, but you're in a bit of a rut. It's been a couple of weeks without any reading time, and you're wishing you could get back on the horse. Regardless of your situation, the advice is the same. Just start reading. Now, I'll make 2 qualifiers to help make this stick a little better, encourage some momentum. First, you should pick something that interests you. It's good to challenge yourself in reading, but when you're trying to get going, picking something that's easy for you to get into will be helpful. I remember many years ago when I was pastoring a church in Chicago, one of my members really wanted to start reading, and he started by reading a book on photography because that was his favorite hobby. Just getting started in reading will help you be able to continue on and build some momentum early because you'll be reading something you enjoy and you'll find a natural drive to finish it well. Second thing that I want to qualify this with is this. Pick a shorter book. Some of the best books I have read have been well over 500 pages. You should, in due time, challenge yourself to slowly read through big books. But when you're just getting started or jump-started, it's best to pick short books that you can finish in a reasonable time frame. You'd be amazed how encouraging it is to finish a book. When you turn that last page, it instantly motivates you to pick up the next book. This will help snowball your capacity, and you'll find yourself able to consider bigger and bigger books as you go on because they won't be as daunting to you. Picking a book that interests you and a reasonable length is a great way to get started or help restart you along the way as you find yourself in a rut. Tip number 2, quit bad books. If our goal is to build momentum in reading and to have the process be enjoyable along the way, we need to be prepared to quit bad books. A lot of books get published each year, and many of them are bad. We can admit that. They can be poorly written, uninteresting, or just unhelpful. When you find yourself in the midst of a bad book, it can feel wrong to quit it. Some people feel guilty over putting the book down and moving on. But inevitably, this will lead to some slowing down and then just not reading. A word of caution is needed. Sometimes good books have slow sections. This might be because the content, there might be necessary background information that takes a while to explain and isn't the most appealing to the reader. Sometimes an overall good book has a section which is just poorly written. Other times we might be reading a book and we might lose steam. We don't just want to quit books for the wrong reason. We don't want to be undisciplined in our reading. We want to avoid bad books ruining our habit and persevere when it's worthwhile. So how do we know the difference? Well, some people have general rules that they follow. A very popular one is to take the number 100 and subtract your age, and that's how many pages you should read of a book before you quit it. If you're looking for a flat, always applicable rule that's simple and easy to remember, it might be helpful for you. I think it tends to be a little bit more nuanced than that. Several factors play into my decision of when do I quit a book. I ask myself, is this considered to be a classic work? Perhaps I need to challenge myself to keep reading and discover why so many have enjoyed this book. How long is the book? If it's short, like 100 or 150 pages, I don't really want to commit to reading half of the book before I consider quitting it. For a longer book, say 500, 600, 700 pages, 60 to 70 pages isn't enough to get a real true feel for the whole work. How important is the book? Have trusted friends read it and recommended it to me? All these factors play into how long I give a book. One thing I will often do, though, if I find myself convinced I need to quit, I will skim read the rest of the book. I'll flip through the pages, glancing at each page, taking note of the overall progression of the book, and I may indeed pop back in on parts that seem more interesting. The overall recommendation of this tip, however, is to be prepared to move on from a book when it's shown itself to not be worth your time. Tip number 3, let books lead you to more books. One way to encourage your reading habit is to have fun discovering your next read with the help of your current book. Often as you read a book, you'll find your writer referring to other books, and as you see these references, you might find yourself thinking, that sounds like an interesting book. Well, take note of that. Whenever I see an interesting book cited in the footnotes, I highlight the actual footnote itself. It's a reminder for me to go back later and to buy that book. Are several Christian authors you're reading all citing J.C. Ryle's book, Holiness? Go buy it. You'll be surprised how many good books you can come into contact with by simply reading good books. Tip number 4, buy more books. Speaking of buying more books, you should buy more books. Now, this may not seem intuitive to some of my listeners. Some feel the conviction to only buy their next book when they've finished their current book. That's a totally acceptable approach, but it actually isn't the most conducive for reading more. As you buy more books, you'll develop a library in your home. These books will then be ready and available for you to pop in whenever you need. Perhaps a question comes up and you remember you have a book. Or you find yourself really interested in a subject that clicks in your head that you've been meaning to read the book on the Atonement or the Trinity for a while now. Having a library will encourage your reading. Instead of waiting for a book to come in the mail or having to hunt online for it, you can dive in right then and right there because it's in your house. Of all the books I've read, the ones that have been the most impactful reads for me have been books that I've owned for several years prior to reading them. You shouldn't feel bad about investing in good books. They're an asset. Al Mohler, the president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, once said, "There's a lot worse things you can spend your money on than books." That's very true. Not long ago, before the days of making so-called man caves in homes, men worked on having a study equipped with many books. Having a home library was seen as a tremendous gift to the family, and we should bring that back today. Have a study, fill it with books, and it will help you read more. Tip number 5, read books with others. Another way to encourage your reading and provide some accountability is to read with others. Maybe this is a small group at your church or a group of friends who are all interested in the same book. Whoever it is, reading with other people can encourage you to read more. You'll also find this can deepen your enjoyment of a book. As you have conversations about your reading, you'll find your friends have insights that you didn't see. Sometimes the group will pick a book you wouldn't have chosen yourself, but ends up being a rewarding experience. Reading with others will absolutely help you to read more. Tip number 6, make a plan. Like anything in life, it helps to have a plan before we try to accomplish something. When it comes to reading, it can be easy to shoot from the hip. This can be good in seasons, but if we want to read consistently and sustain it over a long duration, having a reading plan will be helpful. This doesn't need to be overly complicated. Simply looking over the books you own and you're interested in reading, and then starting to jot down which ones you would like to get after first. You might start with a really reasonable goal of 1 book per month and lay out the books that you're reading now and the book that you will be into next month. As you read more, you'll find yourself wanting to read more, and you can then build out your plan to be a little bit more robust and a little more helpful. I like to break my plans up into categories of reading. I read theology, American history, biography, books on business and economics, anything related to Winston Churchill, and a whole lot more. I write down on a legal pad the different genres I want to read, and with all the books under each category. I can then make sure I'm balancing my reading and keeping it fresh as the year goes on. This also helps me make sure that a good book I'm eager to get to doesn't fall through the cracks. I also like to denote in the reading plan how I will try to read these books. Some books can be skim-read. Others have a need for more thoughtful study and need to be done with a notepad and pen in hand. Other books are read for pure enjoyment and can be consumed as fast as I can read them. Balancing out the kinds of books I read each year is very helpful. I don't want to overload on heavy, dense books, which are taxing for me to stick with them. I want to have a lot of diversity here. This helps us read more and also leads us to our next tip. Tip number 7, read multiple books. I used to be the guy who would only read 1 book at a time. When I was just beginning college, I found the very idea of reading several books at a time to be unthinkable. I was convinced I would have a bunch of half-read books and never finish any of them. When I came to learn, however, is that the opposite is true. Reading several books at once actually helps you read more and finish books more quickly. The reason for this is tied to what we just talked about in tip 6. We read books differently. Different types of books have different kinds of reading. When I study Berkhof's systematic theology, it will be different than if I read a collection of Winston Churchill speeches. Furthermore, we read different types of books at different times. The books requiring the most thoughtful engagement are not sitting on my nightstand. When I go to bed, I want something a bit lighter that I can easily pop in and out of, and it doesn't require me to fully remember everything from the night previously. This makes sense, but it poses a problem. You may find yourself in a book which requires a certain attention span, but have all sorts of margin in your life to read other books. Reading several books at a time allows you to take advantage of all those reading opportunities throughout your day and make progress in several books at the same time. Tip number 8, have books all around your house. If we want to capitalize on reading several different kinds of books at the same time, I'd recommend placing those books where you're most likely to read them. Have books all over your house. It doesn't just look good, it will make it easier to get into a book quickly when a moment arises. I've got several books on my nightstand next to my bed. Those range from Lord of the Rings to anything by Cal Newport, and some books I would want to consider for this channel even. Those are books I'm looking to enjoy, but don't need to study in any formal sense. It's easy for me to pop in and quickly glance and read a little bit, and because it's right before bed, when I get the urge to read, I don't have to get up and go find a book. It's right there, and I can grab it. I keep the books I'm studying, like Turretin's Eclectic Theology, books for my doctoral studies, and commentaries for my sermon prep right on my desk. It's close by, and so when I find myself with a little break during the day and I can get in some extra reading, my mind is sharp and I'm ready to take on something a bit more demanding. Tip number 9, always bring a book with you. In the same stream as tip number 8, I'd recommend you always bring a book with you. If you have a briefcase or a backpack that you bring with you to work, put books in there. If you're going out to get your car oil changed, bring a book. Anytime you leave the house, make it a habit of bringing a book. I've got sports books, smaller Christian living books, and others in my bag that I take outside when I go to meetings or work in a coffee shop, or when I'm just leaving the house for an extended period of time. If someone is late to an appointment, I've got something I can pull out and read for 5 to 10 minutes rather than just scrolling on my phone. You will be amazed at how many books you can finish in a year reading like this. Tip number 10, make use of technology. Finally, let's talk about making use of technology in ways that can help our reading. 2 applications I want to highlight here. First, I would encourage you to make use of a Kindle or an e-reader device. You can take advantage of several of the tips that we've discussed already by using a Kindle. You can carry several books with you at all times, books that have different reading styles and reading lengths. It also has a backlight so you can read it in bed. And it's also something that is regularly seen out and about in coffee shops or waiting rooms, so it's socially acceptable just to pull it out and keep reading. While I will always prefer physical books, having a Kindle unlocks a lot of opportunities for you. As I record this, I'm preparing to take a flight in just a couple days, and I'm making sure my Kindle's charged because then I can have at least 20, 30, 40 books with me on the plane, and I can read whatever is the most interesting to me in the moment. Second, I'd encourage you to listen to audiobooks. You can redeem a lot of time driving around town, commuting to and from work by listening to audiobooks. Let's be real, most podcasts are overrated. Using your hands-free time to listen through books instead of podcasts could result in you reading dozens of extra books each year. I love listening to audiobooks when I drive, when I mow the lawn, and also when I'm working in my woodshop. Audiobooks and Kindles also have another use as well. If you're working through a very large book that you own, a physical book, and you realize that as you only have so much time each day to get into it, you can hamper your momentum by having to set it down and perhaps go through a couple of days where you're not able to return to it. I often, if I'm taking a big book, that's an important one that I want to stay in, if it's not too cost prohibitive, I will try to buy the same book on Kindle or Audible. This allows me to be able to put the book down in my house, but then pick it back up in the car. I also want to highlight a key feature that both Kindle and specifically the Audible app have. Audible and Kindle have a sync feature. If you have the book, both in Audible and Kindle, wherever you leave off in one, the other will adjust. So you can go from Kindle reading to listening in your car without having to push any buttons or any work. Now that's a sweet hack. Those are my 10 tips on how to read more. They're by no means exhaustive. There are a lot more that we could go through. What tips would you add to the list? Put them down in the comment section below, and perhaps if we get enough, we could do a follow-up video in the weeks to come. Until then, I hope that these have encouraged you and will help you to read more.